Are there safety concerns about using a microinverter? Will my solar panels rust? You, our viewers, have asked many great questions and shared comments that deserve an answer, and it's time to answer them. Another great question that came up is, are recycled solar panels just turned back into new solar panels?
Good question. So recycling solar panels has been a bit of a challenge to talk about.
Yeah.
As you know, Warren, because historically solar panels just kind of went to landfills or what? What else do you do with them?
And the reality is most of the solar panels have been installed in the last 10 or 15 years and haven't reached the end of their life. So there's no mass requirement for recycling that's cost effective at this point.
Yep. So that's something that is being worked on.
Yeah.
Now I'll just address the question directly. So the raw materials from the recycled solar panels like aluminum, silver, copper, they can be used for new solar panels or other uses. So they can be used for new solar panels. They don't have to be, but they certainly could be. One current example of this, Warren, is Q-Cells.
Yeah.
A very large U.S. manufacturer. They're out of South Korea, but they do a lot of manufacturing in the U.S. They've just partnered with SolarCycle, and I saw just today that Canadian Solar, another large manufacturer, has also partnered with SolarCycle to recycle their solar panels. So the idea is that they're going to partner with SolarCycle to recycle their old solar panels so that they can turn those solar panels into new raw materials, reduce the amount of raw materials required, and then also reduce the load on landfills from solar panels that are getting old. So I found that to be very, very exciting. And actually, just several months ago, I had a conversation with Harsh, who is the product manager over at Q-Cells, and we talked about that extensively. The circular economy and how their goal is to work with companies like SolarCycle to keep those products coming back in for new products in the future. And if you're interested in that, we'll put a link to that video of the conversation that I had with Harsh in the comments below.
The next question is from our Designing a Solar System Complete Guide video. Don't be fooled, people. I got solar 2 years ago and my installer, Titan Solar, closed for good on June 14, 2024. Now I'm left with no support, which is supposed to be a 25 years according to the contract. I can guarantee they'll open up under a new name in a few months to scam more customers.
Ouch.
Yeah, that is upsetting.
Yeah, that is very upsetting, and I feel very, very bad about that. That's very disappointing, very unfortunate. Unfortunately, that does happen.
Yes.
Companies will take advantage of customers, they'll go bankrupt, and they'll open up under a new name and start the cycle again. So I wish that wouldn't happen in the industry. Unfortunately, it does. I will say this, we can provide O&M services to those customers, and I recognize that comes at a cost. You don't get your warranty. The other thing I would say is, when you're looking for a company to work with, make sure you check reviews, see how long they've been in business, make sure they have a local branch, that type of thing, to make sure they're going to be around for the long haul.
Right, and I'd say one other red flag, sometimes you see companies offering, solar installer companies offering warranties that go out 20 and 30 and 40 year, just long warranties out there that should be a red flag on whether or not they're going to be around to support those warranty claims if it's very reasonable or not.
Yep. If they're the lowest cost and the longest warranty,
yes,
they're probably not going to be around.
No, absolutely. All right, next question is from our flat roof video. Can this system work in a state like Florida where we have hurricane requirements? It has a flat roof, a 112 pitch. Thanks.
So your installer should be able to figure out which equipment can work in which situation. So the systems that we install are designed for site specifics like wind load, snow load, pitch of the roof, height of the roof, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're actually engineered for your specific situation. Now, I will say this, I don't see any issue with installing solar in Florida on a 112 pitch, but you might need extra rail, you might need extra roof attachments, you might need extra equipment and extra cost to make it work. Make sure your installer uses parts and products that are designed to work properly.
Yeah. Super. Our next question is a great one about net metering and the cost to the utilities and neighbors. Let me be honest, net metering is freeloading off your neighborhood. Using the grid has a cost. The utilities have fixed costs, infrastructure, staff. If you produce solar, they aren't generating revenue but still have all of the costs. So as a solar producer, who's paying for those costs when net metering? Your community does. As solar expands, the utilities get less and less revenue, but the costs remain the same, so they'll have to raise rates. The rate changes are necessary to keep the grid operating. The only question that I see are what are the fair rates? It sounds like many utilities are trying to make it overly expensive.
That is the question, Warren.
Yeah.
What rates are fair, and how in the world do you figure that out?
Right.
That's really the difficulty and the crux of all this. What I would say is what should be accounted for in solar production values. Value of the generation, of course, should be accounted for. What about offsetting infrastructure upgrades? What about environmental benefits? How do you measure environmental benefits?
Sure.
I mean, not only talking about global warming, but I'm talking about the benefit of having a large solar array a mile from your house rather than a large, coal electricity producing generating facility or natural gas generating facility or nuclear facility a mile from your house. Which
Sure.
would you rather have and why?
Right.
So these are all questions that are impossible to answer completely. I think what utilities and utility commissions try to do is do this as good as they can. Another piece of this is grid services.
Right.
So PPL is our local utility.
Yep.
And just recently we noticed that they use the customer solar array to provide their grid services. They use the inverters from this customer solar array to provide grid services to their grid, but didn't pay the customer anything for it. Now PPL is allowed to do that because right in our agreement with the customer's agreement with them, they say we're going to do this. So they're allowed to do that. But my point is the grid and everyone's neighbors, the whole neighborhood is getting benefits from that customer's inverters, but that customer's not getting compensated for it. So there's an argument on the other side to say, hey, my solar array is benefiting the neighborhood and I'm not getting paid for it. So there's a lot of things that go into this. What I would say is I agree with what's behind this question, and that is we need to have a way of equally compensating solar producers without overly compensating them so that everyone else has to pay for it.
Right, and still allowing the solar investment to make sense. And we've seen these models evolve and different states try different compensation plans other than net metering to figure out their costs. And some have done it well and some are struggling.
Yeah, California's struggling. I mean, they
Right.
made a massive change. So what I would say is when we make these changes, let's make them slowly over time so it's not a massive change.
Right.
Let's grandfather in the projects that are existing so that they get the investment that they were promised. And then how do you do the calculation? I mean, New York has tried this with Value Stack.
Yep.
So sometimes of the day, customers are getting paid 25 cents for their electricity. Sometimes of the day, it's worth much, much less than that. And they base it on all kinds of different factors and time of day factors. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, a lot of complexity, which is why I think this hasn't been solved yet and why I think it's going to take time and effort and a lot of data to solve this question.
Absolutely.
Not
But
an
it
easy
is a
question.
great question.
Great question, not an easy question.
Yep. All right, our next question comes from our Solar Edge versus Enphase. Which solar inverter is better video? Micros never last. They can't take the roof heat. M150s, M190s all failed. The IQ line hasn't been out long. We shall see, but rarely see monitoring that doesn't have some micros out. Anybody who's been around solar for any long of time knows they don't last. Also, how hard you have to fight to get warranty claims.
Yeah, that's a challenging question to think about.
Yeah.
And we have experienced the microinverter challenges. This person mentioned the M150 and the M190, that those are Enphase products from 10, 15 years ago.
Those are old.
A lot of them failed. We replaced whole systems of microinverters, a lot of issues. Enphase almost went out of business. They made a major comeback. They're making product that are a lot better, a lot more reliable. Now, this person's correct. The IQ8 line hasn't been out that long, so it's hard to know how long they're going to last. But I will just reiterate, I mentioned this before, we did a video at Enphase's manufacturing facility in Texas, and there we showed how they're really serious about quality, about reliability. So they know that this is a challenge and an issue.
And I'll add also that I have IQ7s on my roof, and I had some initial failures shortly after installation, but 5 years later I haven't had any issues.
Yeah, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
Now the other that the other thing that we need to address here is how hard you have to fight for warranty claims.
Right.
Now, what we found, our experience here at Paradise has been microinverters, optimizers, inverters aren't that difficult to get warranty claims for. Models are different, but those three electronics that I mentioned, microinverters, optimizers, and inverters, are typically connected to the internet. The inverter company can see them and they can say, oh yeah, that's an issue.
Right.
So we haven't had issues getting warranty claims for microinverters. Obviously, if you have a lightning strike or something like that happens that knocks out microinverters, that's a different story. But we haven't had a lot of issues with that.
But I do recall back in the days of the M150s, 10, 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, how difficult it was to get through to Enphase when these issues were going on. And that seems to have been resolved over the last several years.
Excellent point, Warren. And customers out there with the old D380s, M150s, M190s, yeah, it can be challenging to get warranty service. Yeah. But they've turned that around for today's products.
And one other important point, I think, Larry, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all of the IQ line, they're all backwards compatible. So, or they were replacing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're able in some cases to use their IQ8 line to replace older microinverters.
Correct. Yes.
You know, they set them up with the same parameters and the same output as the old microinverter. They do that with electronics, and they're able to function that way.
Super. Our next question is from our SolarEdge versus Enphase, which solar inverter is better video. Even the Enphase IQ8 line does not have enough continuous output to handle today's higher wattage modules. The tech is not kept up as they clip terribly. Forget 480 or 500 watt panels, you just clip the power.
Yeah, it's very difficult for microinverter and optimizer companies to keep up with the larger and larger and larger modules that are out there.
Yeah.
You used to make small jumps in module wattage, now you're making big jumps. It's virtually impossible, and they're doing the best that they can. But I would say this, Enphase does have an IQ8H, which puts out 380 watts. So that can pair nicely with a 450 or 500 watt module here in the Northeast. They're trying to keep after. I think they're doing a relatively good job with it. But yeah, modules keep growing in size for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. And our next question is from our How Much Do Solar Panels Cost in 2024 video. And that's why it hasn't caught on yet. Nobody's going to want to pay that much for a home, especially these days where homes are less and less permanent. Until it's 3.5 grand instead of 35 grand, it's not affordable. Really hard to justify spending that much on solar panels when your house already comes with electricity from the city. Plus, maintenance that comes from your solar panels. You'd never recoup your costs, especially if you live in an area with snow every day, clearing off solar panels just so you can get warm for a few hours before they get covered again. Too many variables for too much money. In the end, you'd rather spend much more effort than the change would be worth, or you'd spend more and more paying people to do it for you than you would have just a regular monthly power bill. Maybe in another decade or two, technology will be there, but for now, clouds, snow, fallen leaves rounds out to about half the year with no power in some places. For 35,000 or 35K, that's a hard nope. I'll continue to pay $150 a month. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent. Good question, and a lot of interesting points. Now, I will say this: I don't think solar is going to go from 35,000 to 3,500 right away. That's going to take many, many years, if ever.
Yeah.
I will also say this: the technology has advanced. So we had said some of these same things 15 years ago. Technology has advanced dramatically. It's more efficient, more space efficient, more cost effective. And I will also say this, solar is certainly not recommended for everyone.
No.
You know, there's a lot of variables that need to be taken into account. Snow, shading, weather, electric rate. You know, this person addressed really, I believe, all of these, the installation price. So while it's not for everyone, we've helped well over 2,000 customers make the decision to go solar and benefit from it. So there's a lot of variables. I would say make sure your installer walks you through all those variables and that you're comfortable with what they're saying. And if you're comfortable with it and it goes as they said, you should have a pretty good experience.
Yes, and we've also we've met with many customers over the years where we've told them solar's not ideal for you. Mm-hmm. And maybe it would be a hard nope for me as well if I had a $150 a month bill in an area that got very little sun, a lot of snow, leaves covering my rooftop, whatever it is. So could be in agreement with that.
There's a lot of people it doesn't make sense for.
Yes, and
but
he
there's a lot of
might
people it
be
makes
one
sense
of them.
for. Absolutely.
Yep. So our next question is from your solar company went bankrupt. Do this next video. The situation I find myself is the manufacturer SunPower has declared Chapter 11, hoping as part of the buyout of assets I get some kind of warranty, but almost more importantly is the data that they've collected over the years. I'd hate to lose it, as it lets me know if my panels are working properly. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, again, that's very, very, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
SunPower is one of those companies that we were watching. They had a lot of challenging financial situations. The difficulty, Warren, is that they made a great solar panel.
Yeah.
They weren't profitable, but they made a great solar panel. So you want their solar panel, but if they're not going to be profitable, then there goes your warranty. So it is very unfortunate. Now, we can assist folks who own systems that are not installed by us or who were being installed, but we didn't sell the system. We can help those customers. Of course, that comes at an extra cost. Obviously, whether or not you're able to keep your data, that's up to the manufacturer, and hopefully you can. It seems like you should be able to, but obviously that's up to your manufacturer.
All right, our next question is from our what happens to solar when the power goes out video. What triggers the shutdown in the inverter?
So inverters are constantly checking the grid just to make sure that everything's in spec. They're constantly looking at grid voltage, they're constantly looking at grid frequency to make sure everything's within an acceptable range. So if voltage or frequency goes out of that range, then the inverter is going to shut down. Or if the grid shuts down, the inverter shuts off completely because it's out of spec.
Sure.
And again, the purpose of that is just so that you're not pushing power back out onto the grid when somebody's working on it.
Sure. So that concludes our questions and answers for this video. So thank you, Larry, for helping to answer all of those questions. If you please continue to engage with us, we'll either respond with a video just like this, or we'll respond directly to your comments in the comment section below. Whether you're investing in solar for your home or business, our videos are designed to guide you every step of the way. If this video was helpful, hit the like and subscribe to keep up with the latest in solar energy. Then dive into our residential and commercial solar playlists to continue learning.